The greatest villains are not just evil. They believe they are righteous. They see themselves as victims, which justifies their atrocities. But how can you be a villain without ever realizing it? How can you believe you're a victim, yet you're the villain? Well, if you thought being a victim was the furthest thing possible from being a villain, you're in for a surprise. A range of villains, from the biggest to the smallest in popular movies, have a massive victim mentality problem. Some will surprise you. Let's examine 5 different victim beliefs and see why it's so hard to realize that you're the one who is on the wrong. 1. Revenge. We all think we can tell the difference between seeking justice and seeking revenge, until you are the one who is the wronged victim. Everyone else will likely see the situation impartially, but your victimhood will make it nearly impossible for you to see things clearly. An extensive range of villains fall under this category. If you've ever thought to yourself that movie villains all seem to be the same, it's probably because many movies seem to gravitate towards this basic type of villain. So, what makes one villain stand out from the rest is likely the villain's unique character. And one particular villain is probably in your mind right now. Voldemort's revenge in Harry Potter. Voldemort's villainy is deeply rooted in his belief that the world wronged him. As a child, he was abandoned by his Muggle father and grew up in an orphanage. Instead of overcoming his pain, he let it fester into hatred, not just for his father, but for all Muggles and those he deemed weak. Here's a quick recap of the series to get a clearer perspective of the villain. The Harry Potter series follows the journey of a young wizard, Harry, who discovers he is the chosen one destined to defeat Lord Voldemort, a dark wizard who seeks to dominate the wizarding world. As Voldemort regains power, Harry learns more about his tragic past, including how his fear of mortality and belief in his own superiority fueled his rise. His pursuit of pure blood supremacy and immortality ultimately leads to an epic battle between good and evil at Hogwarts. One of the most chilling examples of his victim mentality is seen in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when he tells his followers that he was denied his rightful power and that he suffered greatly because of it. For him, this narrative justifies his reign of terror. Apart from such a villain with a particularly memorable character, villains from exceptionally popular movies might also be especially memorable. Killmonger's revenge in Black Panther. In Black Panther, Killmonger isn't just a man with a grudge. He believes his suffering entitles him to inflict suffering on others. Born from the injustice of his father's death and the oppression of black people, he believes his revenge is justice. Here's a quick recap of the movie to get a clearer perspective of the villain. Black Panther follows T'Challa as he takes on the mantle of Wakanda's king after his father's death. But his rule is challenged by Eric Killmonger, a long-lost relative who grew up in the outside world and seeks to use Wakanda's advanced technology to arm the oppressed and overthrow global powers. His ideology puts him at odds with T'Challa, who must navigate the conflict between tradition, responsibility, and the true meaning of leadership. One of the most striking moments showcasing Killmonger's victim mindset is when he challenges T'Challa for the throne. He doesn't just want to rule Wakanda. He wants to make the world pay for his pain. He commands that Wakandan weapons be distributed globally to incite revolution and violence. His vengefulness doesn't let him realize that instead of seeking balance, he is seeking destruction. Apart from such a villain from a popular movie, at times the villain might be more like a forgettable footnote, but the consequences of their actions would be forever burned into your brain. Zemo's revenge in Captain America: Civil War. For Zemo in Captain America: Civil War, his entire mission is fueled by revenge against the Avengers for his family's death in Age of Ultron. Captain America: Civil War sees the Avengers split apart when governments push for oversight after a mission goes wrong. Meanwhile, Zemo, a former soldier who lost his family in Sokovia, manipulates events from the shadows, framing Bucky Barnes and uncovering a secret that pits Iron Man against Captain America. As the heroes battle, Zemo's quiet yet devastating revenge plan unfolds. proving that destruction doesn't always come from brute force, but from division and betrayal. One of the most tragic yet villainous moments in the film is when Zemo manipulates Tony Stark into fighting Steve Rogers by revealing that Bucky Barnes, under Hydra's control, killed Stark's parents. His aim is not just to hurt the Avengers. He wants to tear them apart from the inside. Unlike Killmonger, Zemo doesn't seek power. Instead, he is a man consumed by grief, using his victimhood as an excuse to cause chaos. Zemo's revenge was methodical, a slow-burning plan designed to unravel his enemies from within. But some villains are not content with working in the shadows. They want to claim the throne itself, believing it was stolen from them. Scar's revenge in The Lion King. Scar, the jealous younger brother of Mufasa, is another classic example of a villain whose victim mentality leads to destruction. Feeling overshadowed and believing he was unjustly denied the throne, he orchestrates Mufasa's murder and convinces Simba that he is responsible for his father's death, sending him into exile. The Lion King tells the story of Simba, a young lion prince whose idyllic life is shattered when his father, Mufasa, is killed by his uncle Scar. Manipulated into fleeing, Simba grows up in exile, unaware of the suffering Scar has inflicted upon the kingdom. With the help of old friends, he must confront his past, reclaim his throne, and restore balance to the Pride Lands, learning the true meaning of responsibility and courage. Scar's actions are driven by his belief that he is the rightful ruler and that he has been wronged. However, once he gains power, he proves that he is not fit to lead. Pride Rock falls into ruin under his rule, and his victimhood does not justify the suffering he inflicts on his kingdom. Scar's jealousy and sense of injustice led him to seize power. Some villains, however, do not seek a throne. They seek to make others suffer as they have suffered, turning their pain into an eternal curse. Davy Jones's revenge in Pirates of the Caribbean. Davy Jones, the vengeful captain of the Flying Dutchman in Pirates of the Caribbean, is yet another villain driven by perceived betrayal. Once a man in love, he was consumed by rage when his beloved Calypso failed to meet him on the appointed day. Feeling abandoned, he carves out his own heart, locks it away, and dedicates himself to vengeance. The Pirates of the Caribbean series follows Captain Jack Sparrow and his endless misadventures in pursuit of freedom and fortune. In Dead Man's Chest and At World's End, he faces off against Davy Jones, a cursed sea captain who drags souls into servitude aboard his ghostly ship. Jones' pursuit of Jack ties into a larger battle between pirates, the British Empire, and supernatural forces, all while his own tragic backstory unfolds, revealing the depths of his bitterness and rage. Davy Jones's victimhood justifies his cruelty. He punishes sailors, forcing them into servitude aboard his cursed ship. But instead of bringing justice, it turned him into the very monster he despised. Davy Jones allowed his heartbreak to consume him, warping him into something far worse than the betrayal he suffered. Similar to such villains who begin with tragic romance, some start with admiration, only to have it twisted into bitterness when they feel rejected. Syndrome's revenge in The Incredibles. Syndrome, the villain from The Incredibles, began as a fanboy rejected by his hero, Mr. Incredible. Feeling slighted and believing that he was unjustly denied a place among superheroes, he embarks on a lifelong mission to make them suffer as he did. The Incredibles is an animated film about a family of superheroes forced to live in hiding due to government restrictions on their kind. When Mr. Incredible is lured into a trap by Syndrome, a former admirer turned villain, his family must come together to stop a sinister plan that threatens to change the world forever. Syndrome's ultimate plan? To create artificial superhero technology, eliminate real superheroes, and sell his inventions so that everyone can be super, meaning no one truly is. For him, his victimhood justifies deception and destruction. In each of these cases, the villain convinces themselves that they are not the bad guy. They are simply getting what they deserve. But their pain does not justify their destruction. And once revenge fuels your sense of righteousness, it can lead to an even more dangerous belief: the idea that the world itself is irredeemable. 2. Believing that everyone is evil. This is another victim mentality that seems quite easy to debunk. Obviously, not everyone is evil. However, it's actually almost impossible to debunk when you look at it practically. But it gets so much worse. Believing that everyone is evil gives you justification to harm anyone that crosses your path, not just those who wronged you, as is the case with revenge. And, surprisingly, the practicalities of human life actually support your belief. Let's analyze some villains of this type. Such villains may not be the main movie villains, but this perception of the world makes their actions stand out in a movie. The Salesman's justification in Squid Game. The Salesman in Squid Game is a perfect example. He had moved up the ranks from a worker clearing up bodies of players in the fatal Squid Games to being one of the soldiers eliminating players, and now a recruiter for new players. Squid Game is a brutal survival competition where 456 financially desperate people are invited to play children's games for a massive cash prize. However, the catch is that losing means death. Throughout the series, we see the desperation and moral decay that comes with survival at all costs. The salesman, who recruits new participants, embodies the game's sinister ideology, preying on society's most vulnerable under the belief that they are already doomed. He reveals his perception of the world in a conversation during a scene where he breaks into Gi-hun's motel. Gi-hun was the winner in Squid Game Season 1, who was now defiantly searching for the Squid Game operators in order to bring it down. In the motel, the salesman challenged Gi-hun to a game of Russian roulette, during which he taunted Gi-hun, stating that winning the games didn't make him any more special than everyone else who he considered to be nothing more than pieces of trash. In his mind, all he was doing was taking out the trash. After all, you can't let the trash pile up since it will stink up the whole place. Therefore, he is the good guy doing the hard work of cleaning up the world. What a convenient way for an assassin to rationalize his gruesome trade. However, it seems that it would be extremely easy to debunk this mistaken belief since not everyone is evil. So, how can someone hold on to such a belief? Well, the unfortunate reality is that even good people do evil things, since no one is perfect. And many people end up doing the opposite of what they claim. Since the salesman had spent virtually his entire life working in the Squid Game, he had seen people at their worst. Even those who were supposedly morally upright would not hesitate to fight for their own survival at the expense of others. This was evident in Mingle, the third game, where players would shove one another in order to get into the limited safe rooms available. While the salesman coldly rationalizes his grim role as the world's cleaner, other villains take a more chaotic approach. They step in with a radical challenge to morality itself, determined to expose the darkness they believe lurks in every heart. The Joker in The Dark Knight. The Joker is the most iconic example of a villain who believes the world is inherently evil. He doesn't just accept chaos. He thrives on proving that everyone, deep down, is just as bad as him. In The Dark Knight, Gotham City is thrown into chaos as the Joker orchestrates a reign of terror, testing the moral limits of its citizens. He targets Batman, Gotham's protector, by forcing him into impossible ethical dilemmas, including corrupting the once virtuous district attorney Harvey Dent. The Joker's goal isn't wealth or power, it's anarchy. He wants to expose the world's hypocrisy, believing that even the best people will turn into monsters when faced with fear and desperation. His entire scheme in The Dark Knight revolves around proving that even the most upstanding citizens will betray their morals when pushed hard enough. The most infamous example is the ferry scene, where he sets up two boats, one full of prisoners, the other full of civilians, each given the option to blow up the other to survive. The Joker's assumption? Fear and desperation will expose the true ugly nature of human beings. Yet, despite his belief, the people on the ferries refuse to succumb. They prove him wrong. But because the Joker has fully internalized his victim mentality, he dismisses the result, laughing maniacally even as his plan crumbles. The Joker's entire philosophy is based on selective observation. He ignores acts of kindness and only focuses on the worst aspects of humanity. As crazy as it is, the Joker's anarchic gambit that chaos reveals humanity's true nature might actually seem tame when compared to a different kind of disillusionment. Some villains, shaped by historical trauma and relentless prejudice, emerge with their own bitter conviction that human cruelty is inevitable, regardless of whether there's peace or chaos. Magneto in X-Men. Magneto is another villain who firmly believes that humans are inherently evil, particularly toward mutants. As a Holocaust survivor, he has seen firsthand the depths of human cruelty. This trauma fuels his belief that humans will always oppress those they see as different. The X-Men film series follows a world where mutants, people born with extraordinary abilities, are feared and discriminated against by society. Magneto, originally named Eric Lenshair, experienced this prejudice early in life, first as a Jewish child in Nazi concentration camps and later as a mutant. While Professor X seeks peaceful coexistence between mutants and humans, Magneto believes war is inevitable and takes an aggressive approach to ensure mutant survival, often resorting to terrorism. One of the most defining moments of this mentality is in X-Men First Class, when Charles Xavier tries to convince Magneto that humans and mutants can coexist. Magneto, however, recalls the pain of watching his mother be murdered in a concentration camp. From his perspective, history will always repeat itself, and mutants will never be safe unless they dominate humans first. This victim mentality justifies his extreme actions, like attempting to end all of humanity in X-Men Apocalypse or trying to wipe out the entire US government in X-Men Days of Future Past. Yet, his perspective is flawed. While humans have persecuted mutants, not all humans are against them. Although similar to Magneto's worldview that is forged in the fires of personal loss and systemic hatred, some villains take this notion to its extreme. Their cold, calculated cruelty transforms prejudice into monstrous deeds beyond what you might imagine that a human is capable of. Amon Göth in Schindler's List. Amon Göth, the commandant of the Płaszów concentration camp, justifies his horrific actions by believing that Jews are inherently evil and deserve extermination. He sees himself as an agent of order in a world full of corruption, deluding himself into thinking his cruelty is necessary. Schindler's List is a historical drama based on the true story of Oskar Schindler, a German businessman who saved over 1,000 Jews during the Holocaust. The film portrays the horrors of Nazi concentration camps, with Göth embodying the brutality of the regime. He murders prisoners on a whim and abuses his power with sadistic pleasure, showing how dangerous it is when someone justifies cruelty under the belief that their victims are subhuman. One particularly chilling scene is when Göth casually targets prisoners from his balcony, treating their terminations as routine maintenance of what he perceives as a diseased society. His victim mentality, believing himself a protector of purity, leads to unspeakable evil. However, his belief is not justified. His enemies are innocent people trying to survive, proving that his worldview is a self-serving excuse for his monstrosities. Unlike Amon Göth's brutal justification of his atrocities, rooted in a warped sense of order and purity, other villains start off as brilliant and even admirable idealists. But then, they eventually succumb to the seductive power of absolute judgment, convinced that purging evil means reshaping the world itself. Light Yagami in Death Note. Light Yagami, the protagonist-turned-villain of Death Note, starts as an intelligent high school student who discovers a notebook that allows him to terminate anyone by writing their name. He convinces himself that the world is irredeemably evil and that he alone must purge it of criminals. In Death Note, Light initially uses the notebook to rid the world of dangerous criminals, believing he is delivering justice. However, as he gains more power, he begins eliminating anyone who threatens his control, including law enforcement and innocent people. His descent into tyranny shows how quickly a savior complex can turn into ruthless dictatorship when someone believes they are the only one who can fix the world. One defining moment occurs when he terminates Ray Penber, an FBI agent tailing him, along with Penber's fiancée, Naomi Misora, simply because they pose a threat to his plans. Light's reasoning? He believes the world is corrupt, and that eliminating anyone in his way is a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. But his paranoia grows, and his victims soon include the innocent. His belief that everyone is evil turns him into a far worse tyrant than those he originally set out to punish. Wilson Fisk, Kingpin, in Daredevil. Wilson Fisk, the crime lord in Daredevil, operates under the belief that society is inherently broken and that he alone has the vision to fix it. However, he sees himself as a perpetual victim of childhood abuse, of an unfair system, and of betrayal by those closest to him. In Daredevil, Wilson Fisk presents himself as a philanthropist trying to rebuild Hell's Kitchen. But beneath his public persona is a violent crime lord who will crush anyone in his way. He manipulates, kills, and corrupts to achieve his vision of order, believing that his brutality is necessary. His tragic past fuels his belief that the world is against him, but in his quest to fix society, he becomes its worst oppressor. One of the most striking scenes comes when Fisk brutally kills Anatoly Ranskahov for embarrassing him. His victim mindset leads him to believe that any challenge to his authority is an attack on his very existence. He isn't merely fighting corruption. He is perpetuating it while convincing himself that he's the necessary evil to bring about order. So, despite these villains' perceptions being easy to debunk, they have seen firsthand the difference between what people say and what they do. And it wasn't pretty. Their worldview was shaped by moments of betrayal, hypocrisy, and cruelty, leading them to believe that everyone is evil. But this belief is ultimately self-destructive. It justifies any action, no matter how extreme, because if the world is irredeemable, why bother with morality at all? Surprisingly, these first two victim mentalities, revenge and believing that everyone is evil, are the only ones that can be debunked with practical examples. But what happens when a victim mentality doesn't need proof? What if it doesn't rely on personal experience at all? That's where things get even more dangerous. The next mentality isn't just hard to overcome. It's almost impossible. 3. Believing that people's existence is harmful. For a villain seeking to clear his conscience, people don't need to do anything wrong to be used as unwitting scapegoats. Here, people merely existing can be your ticket to a conscience-free career as a villain. Their mere existence is reason enough to eliminate them. That's not the only scary thing about this victim mentality. Villains with this belief tend to make it a personal mission, even to the extent of being martyrs for their so-called just cause. At this point, you're starting to deal with villains who will not back down, give up, or give in. They will not be bribed or negotiate. One particular villain is probably in your mind right now. How Thanos justifies his universe destruction. Thanos in Avengers. Infinity War is a perfect example. Avengers. Infinity War follows the Avengers as they struggle to stop Thanos, a powerful warlord seeking the Infinity Stones, 6 cosmic artifacts that grant ultimate power. Thanos' plan is to erase half of all life in the universe to prevent overpopulation and resource depletion. As the heroes try to prevent his genocidal mission, Thanos proves to be an unstoppable force, culminating in a devastating ending where he succeeds in wiping out half of existence with a snap of his fingers. In a pivotal scene on Titan, he explains to Doctor Strange his rationale for wiping out half of all life in the universe. His justification is simple. Overpopulation leads to suffering. He witnessed his own planet, Titan, collapse due to dwindling resources and an unchecked population. To him, this is undeniable proof that his radical solution is not just necessary, but merciful. His twisted logic extends further when he sacrifices Gamora, the only person he truly loves, to obtain the Soul Stone. His willingness to destroy even what he holds dear reinforces his delusion. He believes he is the only one strong enough to make the hard choices. However, his actions are based on false victimhood. Instead of seeking actual solutions, he adopts mass terminations as the first and only option, proving that his motivations stem more from ego than necessity. Ultron in Avengers, Age of Ultron. Ultron takes Thanos' ideology even further. While Thanos believes he is saving the universe, Ultron sees humanity itself as a virus that must be eradicated. In Avengers Age of Ultron, Tony Stark and Bruce Banner create an artificial intelligence named Ultron to protect the world. But it quickly turns against them. Viewing humanity as its greatest threat, Ultron builds an army of machines to wipe out all human life, culminating in an apocalyptic plan to drop a city-sized meteor on Earth. The Avengers must unite to stop him before he enacts his plan of mass extinction. After analyzing humanity's history, Ultron concludes that humans inevitably destroy themselves through war, greed, and corruption. In a key scene, he coldly tells the Avengers, "You're all killers. You want to protect the world, but you don't want it to change. There's only one path to peace: your extinction." He doesn't simply want to correct humanity, he wants to wipe it out entirely, replacing it with artificial intelligence that he believes will be superior. His fatal flaw? His assumption that humans are incapable of change or progress. General Zod in Man of Steel. General Zod is another villain who believes some lives are inherently expendable. Man of Steel tells the origin story of Superman, an alien sent to Earth as a baby when his home planet, Krypton, is destroyed. Years later, General Zod, a Kryptonian military leader, arrives on Earth, seeking to rebuild Krypton by transforming Earth into a new Kryptonian homeworld. To do this, he plans to exterminate humanity. Superman is forced to choose between his heritage and his adoptive planet, leading to a climactic battle that determines Earth's fate. In Zod's mind, Krypton's survival justifies any action, including the complete eradication of the human race. In one of the most chilling scenes, Zod, realizing that Superman won't help him rebuild Krypton at the cost of Earth, furiously declares, "I exist only to protect Krypton. That is the sole purpose for which I was born." His entire identity is built around being a guardian of Krypton's legacy, and when that legacy is threatened, he sees mass terminations as a righteous act. But his victimhood is false. Krypton's destruction was a consequence of its own leadership's failures. Earth had no role in Krypton's downfall, making his war against humanity completely unjustified. Orion in the Hunger Games. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Orion, a key figure in the early days of the Hunger Games, believes that certain groups of people are inherently dangerous and must be controlled, or even eliminated, for the greater good of society. The Hunger Games. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes serves as a prequel to the Hunger Games, exploring the origins of the deadly tournament. The film follows a young Coriolanus Snow, the future dictator of Panem, as he mentors a tribute in the 10th Hunger Games. During this time, Orion, a powerful capital figure, helps shape the brutal policies that turn the Hunger Games into a permanent institution of oppression. His belief in the district's inferiority fuels the cruelty that eventually defines Panem's dystopian society. In one pivotal scene, he argues that the districts are filled with violent, irredeemable people who, if left unchecked, will bring chaos to Panem. His solution? The Hunger Games itself, forcing children to fight to the death as both punishment and deterrent. He justifies this cruelty by insisting that it is necessary for maintaining order and preventing rebellion. His victimhood comes from his belief that the capital is under constant threat and that he is merely defending civilization from destruction. But his perception is deeply flawed. Rather than preventing violence, he creates it, turning Panem into a dystopia where cruelty is institutionalized. Orion's actions reveal how dangerous it is when someone believes that certain lives are inherently disposable. The High Evolutionary in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The High Evolutionary is another villain who sees certain lives as inherently inferior and therefore disposable. In Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the Guardians face off against the High Evolutionary, a scientist obsessed with creating the perfect species. He conducts cruel experiments on animals and humanoids, including Rocket Raccoon, whom he sees as a failed experiment. As the Guardians fight to stop him, Rocket's tragic past is revealed, showing the horrors of the High Evolutionary's relentless pursuit of perfection at the cost of countless innocent lives. His goal is to create the perfect species, which leads him to conduct horrific experiments on sentient beings. In one of the most heartbreaking scenes, he brutally exterminates entire groups of creatures, including Rocket's childhood friends, simply because they are not flawless in his eyes. He believes that imperfection itself is a crime, and since he sees himself as the only one capable of correcting this flaw, he justifies genocide as a scientific necessity. However, his belief is fundamentally flawed. His creations often surpass his expectations, proving that he does not need to wipe out entire species to achieve progress. Agent Smith in The Matrix. Agent Smith represents a more philosophical approach to this victim mentality. He despises humanity not because of personal suffering, but because he believes humans are a parasitic anomaly. The Matrix follows Neo, a computer hacker who discovers that reality is an illusion created by intelligent machines. Humans are unknowingly trapped in a simulated world while their bodies are used as an energy source. Agent Smith, an advanced AI program, serves as an enforcer within the Matrix, seeking to eliminate anyone who disrupts the system. Unlike other agents, Smith harbors a personal hatred for humanity, viewing them as a plague that must be eradicated. In The Matrix, he delivers one of the most infamous monologues in film history. Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure. This belief makes him merciless, willing to kill both humans and fellow programs to fulfill his goal of total domination. However, his perspective is self-serving. He considers himself a victim of human existence while ignoring his own insatiable hunger for control. Villains who believe that people's mere existence is harmful are among the most radical and unshakable in their beliefs. They don't just feel wronged. They see themselves as saviors. But their logic has a fatal flaw. Who decides which lives matter? Time and time again, their solution is not to protect life, but to destroy it, proving that their victimhood is a justification for their own unchecked power. But what happens when a villain takes this belief even further? What if they go beyond seeing others as harmful and instead see goodness itself as oppression? 4. Believing that good is evil. How far can a villain go to justify their actions? What about claiming that the very qualities that make heroes valuable to society are actually a threat? This victim mentality is not based on facts or reality, but on deeply personal belief systems. Unlike revenge, where a villain reacts to a specific injustice or a belief that everyone is evil based on observation, this mindset is pure ideology, so deeply ingrained that no amount of proof can shake it. The terrifying part? The more proof the villain is shown that the hero is good, the more radical they become. It's why villains of this type will never stop trying to destroy their enemies, no matter how much good the hero does. And one villain epitomizes this twisted perspective. Lex Luthor's hatred for Superman in Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. Lex Luthor doesn't see Superman as a savior. He sees him as an existential threat to humanity. His belief? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Since Superman is the most powerful being on Earth, he must inevitably turn into a tyrant. This is why, despite Superman proving time and again that he's here to help, Luthor is obsessed with bringing him down. Batman v Superman. Dawn of Justice follows the growing conflict between Batman and Superman, fueled by Lex Luthor's manipulations. Luthor, a wealthy and brilliant businessman, believes that no one with absolute power can be truly good, leading him to orchestrate a series of events that make Superman appear dangerous. As Batman prepares to take Superman down, Luthor pulls the strings behind the scenes, ultimately creating the monstrous Doomsday in a desperate bid to eliminate Superman once and for all. One defining moment is Luthor's conversation with Superman on the rooftop, where he taunts him, "If God is all-powerful, he cannot be all-good, and if he is all-good, then he cannot be all-powerful." Luthor sees himself as a victim of power. He grew up under the shadow of an abusive father, and now he applies that same fear to Superman. Instead of seeing Superman's restraint, Lex sees a time bomb waiting to go off. But here's the flaw in his logic. Justice follows the principle of innocent until proven guilty. Otherwise, we would have to put everyone in jail until they all prove that they are good people. Yet because Luthor has already decided Superman is a threat, he twists reality to make his fears seem justified. And he's not alone. Mysterio's manipulation in Spider-Man: Far From Home. Mysterio, aka Quentin Beck, isn't just a disgruntled scientist. He believes that superheroes are frauds and that the world should fear them. In Spider-Man: Far From Home, Peter Parker, still reeling from Tony Stark's death, embarks on a school trip to Europe, only to be recruited by a mysterious hero named Mysterio to fight elemental monsters. However, it is later revealed that Mysterio is a former Stark Industries employee who is using advanced illusions to stage fake disasters and make himself look like a hero. His ultimate goal is to gain public trust and frame Spider-Man as a menace, showing how far he will go to twist reality to fit his personal vendetta. After being fired from Stark Industries, Mysterio sees himself as the true genius who deserves recognition. Instead of accepting that Tony Stark had good intentions, he views him as a corrupt, selfish man who stole his ideas. And now, Spider-Man, Tony's successor, must be eliminated before he misuses his power. In the London battle scene, Mysterio uses elaborate illusions to convince the world that Spider-Man is an enemy, even though Peter Parker has done nothing but try to help. But here's the contradiction. Mysterio himself is the one deceiving people. He justifies his lies because he believes he is fighting a bigger evil, even though that evil only exists in his mind. Such villains convince themselves that good people are the actual villains in disguise. This mindset is especially dangerous because it is built on belief, not reality. Unlike revenge or anger at injustice, this is a chosen perception, one that allows villains to justify any level of destruction in the name of stopping an imaginary threat. But this mentality can go even further. Because what happens when a villain doesn't just see good as evil, but sees evil itself as good? 5. Believing that evil is good. This is the ultimate evolution of victimhood. Believing that cruelty is righteousness. This is the point where you're dealing with the fiercest, most cruel, heartless villains. Yet they believe themselves to be the most righteous, justified, and even holy individuals. How is that possible? That's because you're no longer dealing with facts or personal beliefs. Such villains are now venturing into their own spiritual or ethical values. You might as well be living in a completely different universe. What you consider to be up could be down, left, or right to them. Worse still, to such villains, contrary opinions are way beyond just objections. They are sacrilegious offenses that must be purged with the fires of hell. You definitely don't want to cross paths with such villains. They fall into two main categories: those following a religious or cult belief, and those who literally have a god complex. To villains following a religious belief. Throughout history, people have done the most insane things that defy logic or common sense in the name of religious belief. The same applies to the most destructive villains. Omni-Man in Invincible. Omni-Man, the seemingly heroic protector of Earth, ultimately reveals that he believes humanity is weak, corrupt, and incapable of governing itself. His belief? The Viltrumites, his alien race, are superior beings destined to rule over lesser civilizations for their own good. In Invincible, teenager Mark Grayson discovers he has superpowers and begins training under his father. Omni-Man, Earth's greatest superhero. However, as Mark grows into his role, he uncovers a horrifying truth. Omni-Man is not Earth's protector, but an agent of the Viltrumite Empire, sent to conquer the planet. The series climaxes in a brutal showdown between father and son, with Omni-Man attempting to force Mark to accept his ideology. In one of the most infamous scenes, Omni-Man massacres innocent people to prove humanity's fragility, solidifying his belief that domination, not compassion, is the only way forward. One of the most brutal examples of this occurs in the subway massacre scene, where he forcibly drags his own son, Mark, Invincible, through a speeding train, using his body to obliterate dozens of innocent people. To Omni-Man, this is a lesson. Human life is meaningless in the grand scheme of the universe. His flaw? He justifies mass murder as a necessary step toward order and progress. Instead of seeing the value in human resilience and cooperation, he views Earth as something that must be conquered, even if it means killing the very people he once protected. Arthur Harrow in Moon Knight. Arthur Harrow is a perfect example of a villain whose twisted religious devotion justifies horrific actions. As the devoted servant of Ammit, an Egyptian deity who punishes evil before it occurs, Harrow believes in preemptive justice, judging people not for what they have done, but for what they might do. In Moon Knight, Stephen Grant, a mild-mannered museum worker, discovers he has dissociative identity disorder and shares a body with Mark Spector, a mercenary chosen as the avatar of the Egyptian god Khonshu. Their enemy, Arthur Harrow, is the fanatical follower of Ammit, a deity who judges people based on their future sins. Harrow seeks to resurrect Ammit so she can purge the world of potential wrongdoers before they commit crimes. His methods involve merciless executions, including draining the life force from seemingly innocent people. As Mark and Stephen battle to stop him, Harrow remains convinced that his actions are for the greater good, even as they lead to mass terminations. One chilling scene that demonstrates this is when he places an old woman's hand between his cane, and after a brief moment, he declares her guilty. The woman protests, saying she has done nothing wrong, but Harrow replies that Ammit sees what is to come. Moments later, her life is drained away. The flaw? Preemptive punishment assumes people have no free will. It eliminates redemption, growth, and change. Harrow sees himself as a righteous purifier, but in reality, he is a merciless executioner of people who haven't even committed a crime. Ra's al Ghul in Arrow. In Arrow, Ra's al Ghul leads the League of Assassins, a secretive and deadly organization that enforces its own extreme version of justice. He believes that society is inherently corrupt and that widespread destruction is necessary for true balance. His philosophy is deeply rooted in a religious devotion to order through chaos, making him view mass murder as a sacred duty. The show, Arrow, follows Oliver Queen, a billionaire who returns to Starling City as a vigilante after 5 years of being presumed dead. As he grows into his role as the Green Arrow, he comes into conflict with Ra's al Ghul, the immortal leader of the League of Assassins. Ra's believes that society is too corrupt to be saved and must be purged. He sees Oliver as a worthy successor and tries to force him to take over the League. When Oliver resists, Ra's launches a campaign of terror, orchestrating the termination of countless people to prove his ideology. His obsession with enforcing his version of order ultimately leads to his downfall. One defining moment is when he tries to force Oliver Queen to become his successor, believing that only through taking up the mantle of the demon's head can Oliver cleanse the world of its filth. He sees himself as a messianic figure who must purge the world of weakness, regardless of the human cost. The flaw? Ra's does not seek justice. He seeks control. He believes in a twisted prophecy that makes him feel divinely chosen, justifying countless atrocities in the name of a so-called greater good. Ra's al Ghul in Batman Begins. In Batman Begins, Ra's al Ghul takes the same belief system even further. He sees Gotham as a decadent, rotting city beyond redemption, and rather than trying to fix it, he believes the only solution is burning it to the ground. To him, civilizations are like diseased bodies that must be periodically purged so that something stronger can grow in their place. In Batman Begins, Bruce Wayne, traumatized by his parents' murder, seeks training from the League of Shadows, only to discover that their leader, Ra's al Ghul, intends to destroy Gotham City. The League has historically toppled civilizations they deem corrupt, and Gotham is next. Ra's trains Bruce but ultimately becomes his enemy when Bruce refuses to participate in the city's destruction. The film culminates in Ra's releasing a fear toxin to plunge Gotham into chaos, proving that his idea of justice is nothing more than controlled annihilation. Bruce, now Batman, defeats him, rejecting his master's philosophy that destruction is the only way to restore balance. A critical moment comes when he reveals to Bruce Wayne that the League of Shadows has been engineering the fall of civilizations for centuries, from Rome to Constantinople. He sees his mission as an unbroken holy war against human corruption. The flaw. He mistakes destruction for salvation. Instead of addressing Gotham's actual problems, poverty, crime, and corruption, he seeks to erase it completely, proving that his so-called justice is nothing more than mass murder in disguise. 2. Villains with a god complex. Every cult has a leader, and that leader most likely has a god complex. A villain with a god complex is no different. Kang the Conqueror in Ant-Man and the Wasp. Quantumania. Kang is the ultimate god complex villain, believing himself to be the sole force capable of shaping the multiverse. He doesn't just think he's powerful. He believes he alone has the right to decide which timelines survive and which must be erased. In Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, Scott Lang and his family are pulled into the quantum realm, where they encounter Kang, an exiled conqueror with the power to manipulate time. Kang presents himself as a tragic figure, betrayed by his fellow Kangs, but it quickly becomes clear that his true goal is to wipe out entire timelines that he deems unworthy. He views himself as the only being capable of saving reality through sheer control. His godlike attitude leads to a devastating battle, where he terminates countless beings to escape his prison, showing his complete lack of empathy for those he deems beneath him. His victimhood stems from his exile by other Kangs, whom he sees as corrupt and misguided. In his mind, he is the only one who can stop them, which justifies his countless acts of destruction. One of his most terrifying moments comes when he coldly tells Scott Lang, "Have I killed you before?" implying that he's wiped out entire realities and sees people as disposable. Later, he slaughters thousands in his attempt to escape the quantum realm, showing his complete disregard for life. The flaw. Kang believes control equals salvation, but it's really just oppression. His need for dominance is not a noble crusade. It's a deep insecurity masked as divine purpose. Immortan Joe in Mad Max, Fury Road. Immortan Joe is a warlord who has turned his personal power into a religious doctrine. He controls the Citadel's resources, hoards water while his people suffer, and presents himself as a divine ruler. His followers, the War Boys, see him as a god, willing to die for his favor. Set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, Mad Max Fury Road follows Furiosa, a warrior who rebels against Immortan Joe, the tyrant ruling over the Citadel. Joe hoards water and controls his followers through fear and religious fanaticism. His war boys worship him as a god, believing that dying in battle for him will grant them access to Valhalla. His control extends to enslaving women as breeders, claiming they are his property. The film follows Furiosa's desperate attempt to free these women, leading to a high-speed chase where Joe and his army stop at nothing to reclaim his possessions. His death at the hands of Furiosa symbolizes the collapse of his false divinity. One of the most disturbing moments is when one of the war boys, Nux, tries to sacrifice himself yelling, "Witness me," before crashing his vehicle in a suicide mission. Immortan Joe has indoctrinated his followers into believing that their suffering is noble and that dying for him is their greatest honor. The flaw? Joe isn't a savior. He's a tyrant. He uses religion as a tool to maintain control, convincing others that their suffering is part of a grand, righteous cause when, in reality, it's only serving his ego. Equinox in Batman, Caped Crusader. Equinox believes in absolute cosmic balance to the extent that he is willing to destroy anything that tips the scales. He sees the universe as a grand equation, where every act of good must be countered with an act of evil. In Batman Caped Crusader, Equinox emerges as a villain obsessed with enforcing perfect balance in the universe. He is neither hero nor villain in the traditional sense. He sees himself as an arbiter of equilibrium, ensuring that every act of good is matched by an act of evil. This philosophy leads him to commit horrific acts. His warped sense of morality makes him one of Batman's most dangerous foes, as he truly believes his actions are necessary for the universe to function correctly. One terrifying scene showcases this when Equinox deliberately saves a group of innocent people, only to later orchestrate the termination of an equal number to restore balance. In his mind, there is no morality, only equilibrium. The flaw? Balance is not morality. His victimhood comes from seeing the world as unfair and chaotic, but instead of fixing it, he enforces a warped sense of balance that makes him no better than the very injustices he claims to correct. Eli Sunday in There Will Be Blood. Eli Sunday is a charismatic preacher who claims to be a man of God, yet his faith is nothing more than a tool for power. He manipulates his congregation, humiliates those who oppose him, and uses fear to maintain his influence. There Will Be Blood follows Daniel Plainview, an ambitious and ruthless oil tycoon, as he builds his empire. Along the way, he clashes with Eli Sunday, a self-proclaimed prophet who uses religion to manipulate people for personal gain. Their rivalry intensifies over the years, with Eli publicly humiliating Daniel at his church. However, Eli's own greed and hypocrisy eventually catch up to him. In the film's brutal climax, Daniel, now wealthy and unhinged, turns the tables and humiliates Eli before terminating him, exposing the preacher as nothing more than a fraud. One defining moment is when Eli forces Daniel Plainview, an oil tycoon, to publicly confess his sins and beg for forgiveness in front of the church. However, Eli doesn't do this out of righteousness. He does it to humiliate and dominate someone he sees as a rival. The flaw? Eli isn't guided by faith but by ambition. His supposed morality is just a mask for his greed and hunger for control, making him just as corrupt as the people he condemns. Surprisingly, despite being the most frightening villains, such villains with a twisted worldview could be the easiest to overcome, probably after they have caused untold suffering and harm. Since their worldview is not based on reality, it's only a matter of time until nature restores things back to factory settings. Conclusion. The scariest part is, most villains never realize they are villains. And here's the real warning. Any person can fall into this trap. You too might be a villain, yet you have no idea that you are.